And now, here's lesson number 5, entitled Transcending the Personality.
W.R. Inge wrote, "The depths of a person's being are unfathomable. The light of consciousness only plays on the surface of the waters." In other words, he's saying, we live on the surface of ourselves, never suspecting the depths, rarely experiencing deeper parts of us. Not only do we live on the surface, but we live from the smallest, weakest part of ourselves. He continued, "So far is it from being true that the self of our immediate consciousness is our true personality, that we can only attain real personality as a spiritual and rational being by passing beyond the limits which mark us off as separate individuals." He's saying that this self that we think we are is not what we are at all. It isn't real. It isn't permanent. It's the part of us that is the smallest part. It really does not understand anything. And as we live from that part of ourselves, we constantly have the experience of separation. Separation from God, from each other, from understanding, separation from power, from the ability to function, to perform successfully or joyously in life. And he's implying that there is a real personality, a real self, that can be reached, but only if we pass beyond the limits which mark us, or with the limits which we have assigned ourselves, collectively and individually. If you take yourself for granted and think that you yourself are the starting point, that you are a person who is quite acceptable and right, with right ideas, with the right forms of life, the right attitudes, and so on, then you will never be able to change. If you don't think there's something beyond where you are, then you will stay where you are, thinking that what you are is what you were created to be. And you will never know what life is about or what God is about, because you'll never be able to change. Now, I notice that some people cannot take this in. They start from themselves and they end with themselves because they think that they are excellent as they are. Now, life has built up in us all kinds of people, of personalities. And this comes from our life experience. And this is what we have believed ourselves to be based on what we have experienced in our lives. For example, you may be very good at making shirts or knitting socks or being a good mother or a good father or being a good welder or a good soldier or a good typist, a good businessman. You may really believe that you are a special person because your ability as a business person has allowed you to put together a package of life that permits you to say, I am a self-made person. No one ever gave me anything. I started from the bottom and now I am at the top. Look at me. You may be an efficient bookkeeper or auditor, CPA, a good wife, a good husband, a good teacher, a good salesman. You may be the number one salesman with one of the 500 corporations in America, a great engineer, a great doctor, an important scientist. You may be one of the most important people in this community, and that is a ball player that can hit a ball over a fence, which, if you can do that, many people will come to see you. You can be a lawyer, knowing all about the law, or good at anything you like in regard to doing your duty as taught you in school or by your family or by your ethnic group or by the church. And if you are good at one or more of these things, and most of us have considered ourselves to be a composite of these things, then we have tended to identify ourselves with what we are or can do, or what we have accomplished, or where we came from, or with our maleness or our femaleness. But none of these things have anything at all to do with what you are. Now, how do you escape from all of this? Because this is your prison. Now, of course, if you don't want to escape from all this and feel quite satisfied with what you are, with what you've accomplished, with what you know, with what you understand, and with the people that you have under control in your life, if you have surrounded yourself by your beloved, with whom you will live happily ever after until you walk into the fading sunset, then you have no need of changing, do you? And there's no need then for you to become involved with any type of system that requires growth. Do you know why we have created religions that require nothing of us? Do you know why? Have any idea why? We have created religions that say to us that all we have to do is to believe in something. And if we believe strongly enough in something, we'll be transported at some future time to some place that we do not know where it is, so that we can live happily or miserably ever after as we are. We will do anything to remain as we are, as long as we don't have to change. But the moment that change is required, then there is something in us that says, whoa, 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 wait a minute, I want to change my life, but that does not mean changing me. What that means is that I want to change my job, I want to change my circumstances, and I sure want to change Ralph. But there's nothing wrong with me. I want to learn how to get a parking place right up front every time I go to the shopping center. That's all I need to know. Program parking places. Well, the person is quite satisfied, does not need to change. Well, we may need to, but we don't know about it yet. You see, there are buffers in us. We lie to ourselves. We have a great deal of pride and self-conceit, a great deal of vanity, so that nothing much can really shift in us. Let me ask you a question. Is there anyone here that by chance, just by some miracle, knows another person who needs to be changed? Do you? Someone that you know, their life would be better if they changed. Have you talked to them lately about changing? Have you? What did they say to you? I know what they said to you. They said, you don't know what you're talking about, sweetheart. There's nothing wrong with me that not having you in my life wouldn't fix. Well, it may not have been exactly that, but it was something like that. And yet you know that if they could only see and admit and accept what you can see about them, their lives would be different. True? Do you know that the same thing applies to each one of us? And there will not be an exception in the much larger audience that hears me on this tape. But this is why it's so difficult to teach this idea of further development, the second education, in which the personality of a person must be diminished. You see, we have to transcend our personalities, and I'll tell you more about that in just a moment. Our first education is in the school system. And we learn some more things in school, and some additional things, and then we become the great person that we are. It's very important that we develop our personalities. You cannot do without your personality. But to admit that what we are on the outside is nothing more than a kind of invention. We have invented this thing. We have caused it to be. And now, this is a great bit of wisdom. we must be transformed. Now, the first stage is that of transforming, which really means to change markedly the form or the appearance, to change the nature, the function, or the condition of, to convert. To begin to see that I have this personality, but that I am not it, and that my personality, as it was when I first began to be able to see it, is really not a pleasant thing. It may have been pleasant to me, but not quite so pleasant, not quite so attractive, not quite so comforting to the people in the world around me, and not quite as functional as I had wanted it to be, this self of me. If I can begin to admit that, then it might be possible for me to become willing to change my personality, to become a more acceptable person, to give up a little habit or two that's really not all that bad here and there along the way. Do you understand what I'm talking about? You follow my drift? I'm not going to change all at once because I really don't need that much fixing. But a remarkable thing begins to happen when a person starts to work on themselves. It begins to feel good, and the result is almost immediately available. Anytime there is a shifting in you, a changing of your ideas, of your perspective about life, there will be an immediate movement. Something will happen, and there will be a shifting inside yourself and a feeling of the releasing of pressure and of the unfoldment of joy. It'll be a moment of truth in your life. But in time, as we begin to work with this system of ideas, then we discover a secret that has been hid for ages and generations. This secret that I'm about to share with you is probably known by only a handful of people of the 6 or 7 billion people who live on this planet. I would dare say that all the people who understand what I'm about to share with you could be lined up in the 20 acres of property that we have here. You can get all the people on the earth that understand what I'm about to tell you on this property. That's incredible. And that secret, hid for ages and generations, is Christ in you, your hope of glory. Now, Christ, now that sounded so religious, didn't it? It means your higher self, your other self, your deeper self, your permanent self. This something that has always been there that you really are. And in order to experience this self, one must transcend our normal, ordinary, day-to-day personality. This self that is identified as being whatever it is that I have contracted with myself to be. As long as I'm identified with this outer self, though, I live only on the surface, in the smaller, weaker part of myself. It's kind of like, if you can imagine someone living in a mansion, a palatial house, up on a hill, a high hill. This house is so wonderful. It has more rooms than have ever been counted, and they are furnished richly with beautiful paintings on the wall and silver and gold and thick carpets. And you, who happens to be the owner of the house, live in the broom closet. Can you imagine anyone being that silly? Having servants who will care for you, everything that you need at your command, beautiful music, companions of your choice, pleasure and peace, and yet you go dashing into the broom closet and close the door and will not come out because you don't feel entitled to what is yours, or you don't even know that it is yours. That's the way we are living inside ourselves. We live in the very smallest part of ourselves, and we say, that's all there is. That is only the smallest part of what is, and it's this part of us that must be transcended, and transcend means to pass beyond a human limit. To transcend means an emotion that transcends understanding. It's to go above the understanding that we have, to rise above or across, to surpass, to exceed, and it comes from a Latin word which means to climb over. And this is virtually, literally the truth. We have to climb over our personalities. to get to our individuality or this higher self in us. Oh, we've touched it a moment here and there along the way. But we cannot have this experience until we are willing to begin to think in a different way about a million things. To begin to think in a different way about your problem, your health, your disease if you have one. There's a member that came here. She was in need of surgical attention, a severe problem in her physical body. The problem had been there for a long time. She was not willing to face it. She was willing to face it only on her conditions. She had the way it laid out in her mind. And she had suffered greatly, physically, great pain and distress, and the anxiety that comes when you wonder if your life will leave you shortly. I talked to her this week, and the energy that flowed from her to me came across the telephone line and entered into my mind and body. It was one of the most inspiring conversations that I've had, and I don't know when. She will have surgery later on this month, and one of her friends had just said to her before I called, "Aren't you tired of waiting?" She said, "I am. I can't wait to get into the hospital to have the surgery." Her whole attitude has changed. And she told me that she knows that the surgery will be successful, and even if it isn't, it doesn't matter. She's not concerned whether she will live or whether she will die, because her whole idea about living and dying has changed. She has transcended the state of normalcy that I spoke to her about right there at that point. Because her thinking has changed. Everything in her experience that relates to that part of her experience is exalted. You can change your thinking about any relationship and you'll discover that that relationship will change. You can change your thinking about your marriage, your singleness, your divorce, your spouse's attorney, sex, anything. Can you not see that we are full of prejudices, that we have prejudged the world and the events, we have crystallized attitudes and smugness, and it's so easy to get other persons who have the same prejudices to agree with you. As a matter of fact, we gather in little groups to share our smallness with. Have you noticed that? We love to share our smallness with other persons. Now, persons who love to share their smallness cannot change because they're satisfied with their smallness. Let me repeat again that personality is absolutely necessary for the first development, the first education of each of us as a human being. This is our first contact, and it's our first contract with the earth. But in our personality, we have no real power. We have no real force. We have no real energy. If you don't believe it, look at your life right now. I know that you have not wanted your life, certainly many of the aspects of your life, to remain the way they are, right? If that's true, why have you not changed your life? Why don't you go dashing out right now and change your life? Why don't you? You know why? You can't. That's why. Because you don't have the power to do it. Your personality has no power. Why does it have no power? Because it isn't anything. That's why it has no power. It's not connected to any power, and it never can connect with any power. Your personality will never know God. Your personality will never have a spiritual experience. Ever, ever. It can't. Our personality has developed religions, but religions, those very religions, separate us from God. Those are the religions that tell us that God is angry and that God is over there somewhere. Those are the religions of the personality. But the personality has no power. Now, the moment that you connect with your higher self, there is an immediate shifting of energy. I'm going to prove it to you. You will feel a force, a power that is greater than yourself, and not only will you feel it, but you will be transformed, and something in your life will be changed. This is where miracles come from. A miracle is always created in the moment and at the place that a person shifts from personality to something higher in themselves. Remember the time when Jesus was walking somewhere and the centurion came up to him and said, I've got this servant at home who is very ill. Will you come and heal him? And Jesus said, certainly. And the man paused and looked at him and said, you don't even have to come. You can do it standing right here. Remember that story? That was the shifting of the consciousness of the centurion from personality to individuality. And in that moment, the story reports the healing took place. It's no different with you or me. Any time that you change your thinking, and I don't just mean change it like moving a chair to a different place in the room, but I'm talking about shifting it up. The moment that you phase out or terminate some aspect of your personality, you are caught up in this force or power that's spoken of in every page of the Bible. This power that leads to the rebirth of a person. But remember that our personality must be phased out. It must be terminated. It must be retired, deactivated, if you will, or done away with. Remember John the Baptist, who represented personality at its very best, said, there's one who follows after me, whose shoestrings I'm not worthy of tying, and he must increase and I must decrease. And what he was talking about were these two aspects of us, this outer self that is small and human, and this inner self that is large and spiritual. We live in a kind of rigid pattern of life that causes us to do the same things over and over and over again. And that's why we have no power. But supposing a person is willing to begin to think differently, to get into a different place inside his or her own thinking, believing that a reward will come, that power will come, would that be worth the effort? You see, we're not going to make this effort unless there's a reward at the end of it. I'm not willing to give up my identity unless there's a reward. It's amazing how defensive we are. The reason that we are not willing to change is that we think that if we do, we will lose our identity. You talk to any practicing alcoholic, and he will tell you, or she, that, gosh, if I stop drinking, if I make these changes that you're requiring of me, why, I'll lose my business. I'll lose my customers. My best customers will leave me if I don't drink with them. Ridiculous, you say? That is an absolute reality to that person. They have concocted a system that they defend. Well, you have too. About different things. You have concocted a system of ideas, a belief system about yourself that you will defend to your death. Until you become willing for it to die, and the moment that you become willing for that belief system to die, then the most amazing things will begin to happen to you. And it's called thinking in a new way. Have you noticed how other people who think in a certain way always have the same results in their life but never see it? And how you who know them, who observe them, can predict almost in advance how they will respond in a given moment. And you will even know what they're going to do next Wednesday or Thursday. If you see them this weekend, almost as though it is a choice they made at that moment. They will say to you, gosh, we're going roller skating next Thursday. Or we're going to go bowling. Well, you knew they were going to go bowling. They didn't need to tell you that they were going bowling because that's what they do every Thursday. There's nothing wrong with it except it's just that predictable. We are that predictable. It's very important, though, to become willing to think in a new way, to get out of these rigid centers, these rigid places that we call ourselves. And this is impossible until a person begins to emotionally feel that there's something missing in your life. Until you can begin to believe that there's something missing in you, that you're not complete as you are. I read a letter today that was written by my granddaughter, June the 28th, and I just opened it today. It brought a tear to my eye, and it may again when I tell you about it. My granddaughter, who is 17 now, and some of you heard her last year when she came and played this piano, she'll be going to Boston Conservatory of Music this fall. And she has spent a month this summer examining her life at great depth under the direction of some wonderful people. Terry, at the age of 17, had come to understand that there were some things in her personality that would always stand in the way of her talent, of her creativity. Isn't that remarkable? And she was willing to be changed. And while she was in this process, she wrote me a letter and said some very nice things about me, her grandfather. She said, I now realize that you have given your life, you've dedicated your life to tell people how wonderful they are. And when I read that, I could hardly stand it. I never had thought of it that way, and it's true. I have dedicated my life to tell people how wonderful they are. But do you know that you cannot tell people how wonderful they are unless you first tell them about how miserable they are? Unless you're willing to look at the miserable side of that person and speak the truth to them. Do you understand what I'm talking about? There's a wonderful self in you that I behold. I see it in you. I know it's there. I've experienced it in me, and therefore I know it's in you. And it can do the most incredible things. And I've dedicated my life to telling people about this self that's in them and helping to empower them to experience this higher self. But I know for a fact that you can't do it if you keep defending your lower self. And so I don't hesitate times to speak to that lower self of other persons. It's got to go. It must decrease. The moment, though, that you feel that there's something wrong with you, there is an incredible happiness that begins to happen. It's the most remarkable experience of my life. Again and again and again, when I stop defending my position, peace comes. The power to change comes. And the mistake that I made from that lower self always gets fixed. Do you know that the best things that have ever happened to me were my mistakes? The moment that I can admit them and can do something about the person who made the mistake. The mistake turns out not to be a mistake at all, but is the serendipity. The mistake becomes the miracle. Now, don't hear me say that and go rushing out to make some major mistakes because I said that. It doesn't work exactly that way. See, what I'm really talking about is what the mystics have always said, that there is a place where the ultimate or the utmost or the highest in us is present within the finite world, namely the depth of the human soul. This depth is the point of contact between the finite and the infinite. Paul Tillich wrote that. This ultimate has been called nirvana. It's been called the Christ. It's been called Emmanuel. It's been called the Lord. It's been called the force. It doesn't make any difference what you call it as long as you call upon it and believe in it and turn to it. There's a place in you, matter of fact it is you, and the moment that you put off some aspect of your lower self, your personality, the moment that you can observe yourself lying or pretending or defending or suffering, oh God, the suffering that we do, the wonderful, terrible suffering that we do. We have been taught to suffer by some experts. Do you know that only the personality suffers? Did you know that? If you're suffering about anything, if you're experiencing pain, about anything, it's only because your personality has a real good thing going. Suffering is optional. You can stop suffering at any moment that you desire. You only suffer because you believe certain things about something. And the moment that you give up that belief system, your suffering will stop. You might shoot your foot off. And you'll suffer because you'll think you're a lesser person because you only have one foot, and besides it's bleeding. But if you'll change your thinking at that moment, it won't make a whale of a lot of difference because your foot has nothing to do with you. Some of the most remarkable people I've ever known only had one foot. You think about it. Let me give you some examples of what I'm talking about. There was a man who came for his first time, and he didn't know whether he was supposed to be here or not. And I said some things. Remember when I was talking to you about selecting 25 of your past best emotional experiences and writing them down and then beginning to rehearse them so that when you went out of here and got sad or angry or upset about something, you could reach inside and pull out one of your past emotional experiences? Well, would you believe that that very night he went out, and he's a person that's quite well known in the community, and in a place where alcohol is served, he ran into someone that he intensely dislikes. And have you noticed that anybody that you intensely dislike, they also intensely dislike you? Have you noticed that in your experience? And this person has a way of saying in a rather loud voice some very crude things to our friend who was here. And that is exactly what took place. And our friend, our hero, was about to respond in kind, and then he remembered that he'd been in class that afternoon and that strange person standing up on the platform had talked about some former memories. And he had one. He decided to go across the room and shake his enemy's hand and look him straight in the eye and smile and compliment him. And he did exactly that. And the guy just about fell off the bar stool. It's a true story. This really happened, and this man, our hero, walking back across the room, never felt so much power in his life. Not power over a person, but power over himself. He said it works. Those ideas really work. And they do work. There was a movement of power in him the moment that he was willing to surrender his old ideas, his old approach. See, his personality would have gone across the room and said some very bad things. But there was another part of him that smiled and said, what does that have to do with me? Are you following my drift? I received a telephone call from a man who is an executive with one of the automotives. Some months ago, he began listening to the services on CKLW 800 on your AM dial at 8 o'clock on Sunday morning. He liked what he heard. And it happens that last fall, he accepted the honor of being a speaker at a seminar that was to be conducted in Switzerland for several hundred outstanding scientists, engineers, and psychologists. And at the time he accepted it, he was filled with power. You know how that is. Golly, I can't wait to go. But the closer he got to going, the more the personality convinced him that he had no business accepting that invitation to speak, because he knew that he'd be in the presence of many hundreds of men and women who really understood what he was talking about. And so he took one of these ideas that he heard on the radio, and that was to visualize. And he visualized himself being there and giving a wonderful talk. This concept of taking an idea, visualizing, which is left brain, seeing himself in that position, but also gathering the feeling of his wish fulfilled, reaching back and pulling forward one of those ideas of peace and power and being victorious, the feeling of it. And he put that package together in what he called meditation. And he saw himself giving the most wonderful talk, and a strange thing happened. He has heard hundreds of these talks. They're mostly sterile or cold. But he saw himself giving and animated, talk. He knew his subject well, but he was putting feeling and fun into it. And he went to Switzerland knowing that it would be that way. But wait a second. When he had this vision in his mind, he saw himself receiving, as a result of that talk, an invitation to serve on the board of this great body. And it embarrassed him. He was almost ashamed that he had that vision in his mind. He wanted to withdraw. He would never be asked to serve on that board. He was too young and not internationally known in his field. But he went to Switzerland. Time came and he stepped upon the lectern full of confidence, and he gave his talk, and he knew it was good, and there was a round of applause, and he sat down. The following evening at the banquet, they made an extra place at the banquet table. He was to sit in the audience, but at the last minute they asked him up to be seated among the honored guests. And would you believe that at the appointed moment, to his surprise, he was asked to stand and give a spontaneous talk. And he did it. He said, sitting at the banquet table, he was aware of what a wonderful world we live in. And that which made him aware of this world was so well represented in that room by this group of eminent men and women who were capable with their combined knowledge to bring about the wonderful changes that the world needed. And he spoke from his heart and with gratitude and excitement and fervor. And he said he hurt himself after about 10 minutes, and he was almost embarrassed at what he was saying, and so he sat down. And he got a standing ovation because he was speaking not from his personality, but from his higher self. He made a connection with his God self. And he came back and he was going to call me to tell me what happened. But you know how the personality is, it forgets. He was going to call me someday. He called me yesterday because he had just received the letter in the mail. Guess what? Can you guess? He was asked in that letter to serve on the board of that great organization. Can you feel the excitement that was in his voice when he talked to me? You know what he said? These ideas work. I want to thank you for being on the radio. All I told him was what his heart and your heart already knows. Someone told me that there was a young man to see me. I didn't have very much time, and he stuck out his hand and said, I want to talk to you in your office. And I said, okay. We went into my office. He sat down. He said, I'm the bravest person in the world. He said, all my life I've been scared to death. I have been too afraid to do the things that I'm supposed to do, and therefore I never did anything I wasn't supposed to do. He said, I've lived the narrowest life you can believe. I work nights, 12 to 8. I go to work, I'm depressed all night long, except on Sundays recently I've been listening to the radio, and I hear you on that radio station. And by the time I get home on Sunday, and I park along the way so I can hear the end of it before I get home, and recently on Sunday, I've been walking in feeling so good that my wife walks up to me and smells my breath to say, what's wrong with you? He said, I've got so much energy that I can't control it. And my best friend, who's known me for years, has said to me, whoa, 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 you slow down. You're moving too fast for me. He did not know that he was an agoraphobic and that he had come into the only church in the world that has a group called AIM, Agoraphobics in Motion. And I told him about that group, and he said he's coming. But you know, his fear for the most part is gone. Why is it gone? Because he made a change in his personality. He was willing to no longer be afraid. He connected with his higher self. And there was a transformation. He transcended his personality in some way. He sat in my office. He said, look at this. Just look at me. I'm in your office. He said, I couldn't come into this parking lot before. Oh, what a marvelous experience it is to realize that you can think differently. And it's important to think differently. Yesterday, I had lunch with a man. I've watched him change over the years. The remarkable changes. He was young when I first met him. He still is. Became successful. He wanted to be different, and he worked on himself, and he shared what he had with others. He became successful in a way that was almost unbelievable, and he became so successful that he forgot what brought about his success. And I stopped seeing him. I would see him on the horizon from time to time, way over there somewhere. We went to lunch yesterday, and he said, "Things aren't working so well. Can you tell me why?" I didn't have to. He stopped changing. The personality is there, and it's always trying to come back. You have to keep working on it. Let me give you an example. I have an exercise program. It's not, I don't run 16 miles a day, anything like that, but it's something I've been doing for quite some time. And when we went to China, by the very nature of that trip, I stopped doing it. I knew that in 3 weeks when we got back, I would start doing it. In 3 weeks we got back, and since I was just back from China, I put it off another day or two. Start next Monday. Next Monday came, and I thought, well, I've missed it for 3 weeks. I'll wait a month and then start all over again. And a week passed, and I didn't start again. Now, I knew all about this exercise program. I could talk to you about it, but I wasn't doing it. And then Karen was going away for 2 weeks, and I thought, well, when Karen is gone, my life will be simpler. Won't be anybody there but me. I'll do my exercise program. Would you believe that the very reasons why I was going to do my exercise program when she was gone became the reasons why I didn't do it while she was gone? You understand that, don't you? So I waited until after Karen got back to start my exercise program, and she was back, and I thought, well, she's back, I'll wait another day or two. And I said, no, I'm going to do it. Now, the moment that I started doing it, great power came into me, except something happened. Would you believe that in 2 months of not doing the exercise program, I could only do half as much? Would you believe that? And I was sore. Now, if this is true of your body, how true is it of your mind? If you're willing to change, and if you're working on changing, you will experience dramatic, dynamic power and peace. You will experience miracles in your life because they will come from a higher dimension through you. And when you stop, you will drift for a while, and those miracles will still be there. But in time, you will only be talking a good game, and you will not be doing it. It's very important that you and I, that we stay close to a group like this, and to some ideas like this, and to the inspiration like this. James Martineau wrote, "Let any true person go into silence, strip himself of all pretense and selfishness and sensuality and sluggishness of soul, lift off thought after thought, passion after passion, till he reaches the inmost depth of all. And it will be strange if he does not feel the eternal presence as close upon his soul as the breeze upon his brow. It will be amazing if he does not say, 'O Lord, art thou ever near as this? And have I not known thee?'" And that's the way it really is.
This concludes the lesson on Side A. Now, please fast forward to the end and turn the cassette over for the continuation of The Formula for Success.